The crimson sands of Kepler, 442b, stretched endlessly beneath the twin suns, their dying light casting long shadows across the battlefield. Commander Zuraveltar of the Althean Republic crouched behind the twisted wreckage of what had once been a proud starfighter, her azure skin glistening with perspiration and alien blood. The war had been raging for 3 years now, and the humans showed no signs of backing down from their relentless expansion in Althean space. Zara's 4 arms moved with practiced efficiency as she checked her plasma rifle's charge. The Altheans had evolved on a world with higher gravity and thinner atmosphere, giving them superior strength and endurance compared to most species in the galaxy. Their additional limbs and enhanced reflexes made them formidable warriors, which was why they had been chosen to lead the coalition forces against the human threat. The battle for Mining Station Zirion 7 had been brutal. What should have been a simple operation to retake the facility had turned into a 3-day siege. The humans, as always, had proven more resourceful and stubborn than intelligence reports suggested. They fought with a desperate fury that Zara had learned to respect, even if she couldn't understand it. A distant explosion shook the ground, sending a shower of debris raining down around her position. The humans were making another push toward the eastern perimeter. Zara's communication device crackled to life, her second-in-command's voice filtering through the static. "Commander, we have reports of human forces breaching Sector 7. They're using some kind of new weapon system we haven't seen before." Zara closed her large, violet eyes for a moment. The humans were always innovating, always finding new ways to kill more efficiently. It was both admirable and terrifying. "Hold position, Lieutenant Corvin. I'm moving to provide support." She sprinted across the battlefield with fluid grace, her powerful legs carrying her over obstacles that would have stopped most beings. The Althean military had trained her well, but 3 years of constant warfare had honed her skills to a razor's edge. She was one of the Coalition's most decorated officers, known for her tactical brilliance and unwavering dedication to protecting Althean colonies from human expansion. As she approached Sector 7, the sounds of battle grew louder. Energy weapons discharged with brilliant flashes, and she could hear the distinctive whine of human railguns cutting through the air. The humans had a disturbing tendency to use kinetic weapons alongside energy-based ones, making their forces unpredictable and difficult to counter. Zara reached the top of a rocky outcropping and surveyed the battlefield below. Her enhanced vision allowed her to pick out individual figures even at this distance. The human forces were indeed using some kind of new weapon system, portable artillery pieces that fired concentrated plasma bursts. The Coalition defenders were falling back under the withering assault. She was about to key her communicator to call for reinforcements when movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. A lone figure was stumbling away from the main battle, clearly wounded. At first, she assumed it was one of her own soldiers, but as the figure moved into better lighting, she realized with shock that it was a human. The human soldier was badly injured, leaving a trail of red blood in the sand. He wore the standard-issue armor of a human infantry trooper, though his helmet was missing and his gear was damaged. Even from this distance, Zara could see that he wouldn't survive much longer without medical attention. Her finger tightened on her weapon's trigger. This was war, and the human was her enemy. Every human soldier that survived meant more Coalition casualties in future battles. It would be a simple matter to put him out of his misery with a single shot. It would even be merciful, given his condition. But something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was the way he struggled to keep moving despite his obvious pain, or the fact that he was moving away from the battle rather than trying to rejoin his forces. Most likely, he was simply trying to find somewhere quiet to die. Zara had seen enough death in the past 3 years to last several lifetimes. She had killed humans before, many of them, but always in direct combat when they posed a threat. This felt different somehow. The human was no longer a threat to anyone. Against her better judgment, she found herself moving down from her position toward the wounded soldier. She kept her weapon ready, but something deep inside her rebelled against the idea of killing a helpless enemy. The Althean people had once been a peaceful race before the humans arrived and forced them into this war. Perhaps some part of that peaceful nature still existed within her. The human had collapsed by the time she reached him, face down in the sand. She could hear his labored breathing and see the extensive damage to his armor. Shrapnel had torn through the protective plating in several places, and there were obvious signs of severe burns from plasma weapons. Zara circled around to where she could see his face, keeping her rifle trained on him. He was young, probably no more than 25 standard years. His hair was dark brown, and his skin had the pale complexion common among humans from the inner colonies. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, and his eyes were closed. She knelt beside him, still maintaining her guard. Up close, she could assess his injuries more accurately. The damage was severe, but not necessarily fatal if he received proper medical treatment soon. The largest wound was on his left side, where plasma had burned through his armor and scorched the flesh beneath. Several smaller injuries peppered his arms and legs. The rational part of her mind screamed that she should finish him off and return to the battle. Every moment she spent here was a moment her soldiers fought without her leadership. But as she looked at the human's unconscious face, she found herself thinking about the nature of war and the choices that defined a person's character. Zara had joined the military to protect her people, not to become a killer of the helpless. If she murdered this wounded human, what would that make her? How would she be different from the humans who had attacked Althean colonies and killed civilians? She made her decision. Working quickly, she activated the emergency medical kit built into her armor. The kit contained basic supplies that could be used on most humanoid species, including humans. She applied trauma foam to the worst of his wounds and injected him with a broad-spectrum healing accelerator that would help his body begin repairing the damage. The human stirred as the medication took effect, his eyes fluttering open. They were green. She noticed an unusual shade that reminded her of the forests on her homeworld. For a moment, he seemed confused, staring up at her with unfocused vision. "Don't move," she said in Standard Galactic, the common tongue used for communication between species. "You're badly injured." The human's eyes widened as he fully processed what he was seeing. An Althean soldier, one of the Coalition's most feared warriors, was treating his wounds instead of killing him. He tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough. "Why?" he finally whispered. It was a simple question, but Zara found it difficult to answer. Why had she helped him? Why was she risking her own mission to save an enemy soldier? She wasn't entirely sure herself. "Because you're not a threat anymore," she said finally. "And because someone needs to remember that we're fighting to preserve life, not just to destroy it." The human studied her face with those striking green eyes. Despite his injuries and obvious pain, there was intelligence there and something else. Gratitude, perhaps, or maybe just confusion at finding mercy on a battlefield where none was expected. "What's your name?" he asked. Zara hesitated. Giving information to an enemy, even a wounded one, violated several military protocols. But something about the moment felt significant, as if this conversation would matter somehow. "Commander Zara Veltar," she said. "And yours?" "Lieutenant Marcus Chun," he replied, wincing as he tried to shift position. "Human Colonial Forces, 3rd Marine Division." The name was familiar, though Zara couldn't immediately place where she had heard it. Perhaps he was mentioned in one of the intelligence briefings about human military personnel. It didn't matter now. "Listen carefully, Lieutenant Chun," she said, checking her chronometer. She had already spent too much time here. "There's a Coalition medical station approximately 2 kilometers northeast of this position. If you can make it there, my people will treat your wounds properly." His eyes widened in surprise. "You're letting me go?" "I'm giving you a chance to survive," Zara corrected. "What you do with that chance is up to you." She stood to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Commander Veltar," he said, struggling to prop himself up on one elbow. "Thank you. I won't forget this." Zara looked down at him for a long moment. In the distance, she could still hear the sounds of battle as her forces fought against his people. Tomorrow, they would likely be enemies again. But today, in this moment, they were simply two beings who had chosen compassion over hatred. "See that you don't," she said, then turned and disappeared into the swirling dust. The journey back to Sector 7 took longer than expected. The battle had shifted during her absence, and she had to take a circuitous route to avoid human patrols. By the time she reached her forces, the fighting was winding down. The humans had achieved their objective, whatever that had been, and were conducting an orderly withdrawal. Lieutenant Corvin approached her as she surveyed the aftermath. "Commander, where were you? We could have used your tactical expertise during the final phase." "I was conducting reconnaissance," she replied, which was technically true. "What's our status?" 17 casualties for critical. The humans got away with whatever they came for, but we bloodied them pretty good in the process. Intelligence estimates they lost at least 30 soldiers. 30 human deaths. Zara found herself wondering if Lieutenant Marcus Chun would be counted among them, or if he had managed to reach the medical station. She pushed the thought away. What mattered now was regrouping and preparing for the next battle. The war continued for another 18 months after the incident at Mining Station Zirian 7. Zara rose through the ranks, eventually becoming one of the youngest generals in Coalition history. Her tactical brilliance and compassionate leadership made her popular with the troops, and her name became well known throughout both Coalition and human space. She never saw Lieutenant Marcus Chun again, though she sometimes found herself scanning intelligence reports for any mention of him. She told herself it was simple curiosity, but deep down, she knew it was something more. That moment on the battlefield had changed something inside her, had reminded her of who she wanted to be even in the midst of war. The conflict finally ended not through military victory, but through exhaustion. Both sides had bled themselves white, and the economic cost of maintaining such massive fleets across multiple star systems had become unsustainable. A ceasefire was declared, followed by months of delicate negotiations. The Treaty of Proxima Centauri established new boundaries between human and coalition space, created protocols for future diplomatic contact, and, most importantly, began the process of transforming enemies into neighbors. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. Zara attended the signing ceremony as part of the coalition delegation. The event was held aboard a neutral station at the edge of both territories, a symbolic meeting ground between two civilizations that had spent years trying to destroy each other. The human delegation was smaller than she had expected, led by a group of military officials and civilian diplomats. She recognized some of the faces from intelligence files, career soldiers who had earned reputations during the war. But there was one face she hadn't expected to see. Lieutenant Marcus Chun had survived the war, though he was no longer a lieutenant. The human standing across the ceremonial table now wore the insignia of a colonel, and his bearing suggested he had seen significant action since their encounter on Kepler 442b. He was older, more weathered, but those distinctive green eyes were unchanged. Their gazes met across the crowded room, and she saw the moment of recognition flash across his features. A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth, so brief that anyone not watching carefully would have missed it. But Zara saw it, and she found herself smiling in return. The ceremony proceeded without incident. Representatives from both sides made speeches about peace and cooperation, about turning away from the darkness of war toward a brighter future. Zara listened with half her attention. The rest focused on the human colonel who had once bled in the sand while she treated his wounds. After the formal proceedings, there was a reception where delegates from both sides mingled carefully. The atmosphere was cordial, but restrained, as if everyone was afraid that the wrong word might shatter the fragile peace they had just created. Zara was discussing trade agreements with a human diplomat when she felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Colonel Chun standing there, holding two glasses of what appeared to be human champagne. "General Veltar," he said, offering her one of the glasses. Congratulations on your promotion. I've been following your career with interest. She accepted the glass, noting that he had addressed her by her current rank rather than the one she had held during their first meeting. Colonel Shen, I'm pleased to see you survived the war. Thanks to you, he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she remembered, roughened by years of command. I made it to that medical station you told me about. Spent 6 weeks recovering before I could return to active duty. And yet you continued fighting. As did you. He sipped his champagne, studying her face. Though I heard about your reputation for minimizing casualties and treating prisoners humanely. That's not common in war. Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks, the Althean equivalent of blushing. I simply tried to remember that our enemies were people too. Not everyone would have made that choice, especially not after seeing what both sides did to each other. His expression grew serious. What you did that day, it changed how I saw this war, how I saw your people. She was about to respond when the human delegation leader approached, a stern-faced admiral whose name Zara couldn't recall. Colonel Chun, we need to discuss the preliminary reports from the border survey teams. Of course, Admiral. Chin turned back to Zara. General, I hope we'll have another opportunity to speak before the conference ends. He walked away with the Admiral, leaving Zara with questions she couldn't answer. The war was over, peace had been established, and both their peoples were trying to build a new relationship. So why did seeing Marcus Chun again feel like the beginning of something rather than the end? The peace talks continued for 3 more days. Zara found herself looking for opportunities to speak with Colonel Chun, but their duties kept them busy with different aspects of the negotiations. When they did cross paths, it was always in public settings where meaningful conversation was impossible. On the final evening, there was a formal dinner celebrating the successful conclusion of the talks. Representatives from both sides made toasts to peace and friendship, and there was even some tentative discussion about cultural exchange programs and joint scientific ventures. Zara was preparing to return to her quarters when she noticed a message waiting on her personal communicator. It was brief and unsigned, but she recognized the sender immediately. Observation Deck 7. 10 minutes. The observation deck was nearly empty when she arrived, offering a spectacular view of the nebula that surrounded the station. Stars glittered like diamonds against the cosmic dust, beautiful and distant. She found Marcus Chun standing near the viewing port, still in his dress uniform, but with the jacket unbuttoned. "Thank you for coming," he said as she approached. "I wasn't sure you would." "Why did you want to see me?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. He turned to face her fully, and she could see the weight of everything that had passed between them reflected in his eyes. "Because in 6 years of war, you were the only person who showed me mercy when you had no reason to. Because that moment changed everything for me, and I needed you to know that. Marcus." She found herself using his first name without conscious thought. "I know this is complicated," he continued. "Our peoples are just beginning to trust each other. Any kind of personal relationship between us would be scrutinized, possibly seen as inappropriate or even dangerous. Then, why are we having this conversation?" He moved closer, close enough that she could see the silver threads that had appeared in his dark hair, the small scars that marked his face like a map of battles fought and survived. "Because some things are worth the risk. Because I've spent the last 4 years wondering what might have happened if we had met under different circumstances." Zara felt her heart racing, a physiological response that transcended species barriers. She had wondered the same thing. Though she had tried to convince herself it was merely curiosity about a former enemy who had become something more complicated. "The war is over," she said, as much to convince herself as him. "Yes, and now we have a chance to build something better. Not just our governments, but us. Personally." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she chose. When she didn't, his hand gently touched her face. "I know it won't be easy. There will be people on both sides who won't understand or approve. But I think what we could have together is worth fighting for." Zara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. She thought about the moment on the battlefield when she had chosen mercy over military efficiency. That choice had saved his life, but now she realized it had changed hers as well. "Where would we even begin?" she asked. "The same place we started," he said. "With trust. With the choice to see each other as individuals rather than representatives of our species." She opened her eyes and looked at him, this human who had gone from enemy to something much more complicated. The war was over, but perhaps their story was just beginning. "My government is assigning me to head the new cultural exchange initiative," she said. "I'll be working closely with human representatives to develop programs that promote understanding between our peoples." Marcus smiled, and she could see hope lighting up his features. "Interesting. I've just been offered a position as military liaison for the same initiative. It seems our paths are destined to cross again." "Destiny," she repeated, tasting the word. "Do humans believe in destiny?" "This one does," he said, "especially when it involves an Althean general who once saved his life." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars while slowly past the observation port. The war was over, and peace stretched out before them like an uncharted star system, full of possibilities and dangers in equal measure. Zara thought about the choice she had made on that battlefield 6 years ago, when she had chosen to save a wounded enemy rather than finish him off. At the time, it had seemed like a simple matter of conscience. Now she realized it had been the first step on a journey that would change both their lives forever. The future was uncertain, full of challenges that neither of them could fully anticipate. But as she stood next to Marcus Chun, watching the cosmos turn around them, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced since before the war began: hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to build a new world. Upon 3 months after the signing of the Treaty of Proxima Centauri, General Zara Veltar found herself in the strangest assignment of her military career. The Cultural Exchange Initiative had established its headquarters on New Geneva, a neutral world that had been terraformed jointly by human and Althean colonists decades before the war. The planet served as a perfect symbol of what cooperation between their species could accomplish. The morning sun of New Geneva cast long shadows across the sprawling complex that housed the initiative. Zara stood in her new office, reviewing reports from the various committees tasked with breaking down decades of mistrust and hostility. It was harder than anyone had anticipated. Both species carried deep wounds from the war, and many questioned whether true peace was possible. A soft chime announced an incoming visitor. Zara looked up from her datapad to see Colonel Marcus Chun standing at her doorway, dressed in civilian clothes rather than his military uniform. The sight still surprised her, even after working together for several weeks. During the war, she had never imagined she would one day collaborate with a human officer on anything other than prisoner exchanges. "Good morning, Zara," he said, entering her office with the easy confidence that marked him as a career soldier. "The Terraforming Committee needs our approval on the proposed agricultural zones for the new joint colony." She gestured for him to take a seat across from her desk. Over the past months, they had developed an efficient working relationship, though the underlying tension from their personal connection remained carefully unspoken. Both of them were too professional to let their private feelings interfere with their duties. "The Althean representatives are concerned about the soil composition in sectors 7 through 12, she said, bringing up the relevant documents on her holodisplay. "Our people require different mineral content than humans for optimal nutrition." Marcus leaned forward to study the data, and Zara caught herself noticing the way his hair fell across his forehead. She forced herself to focus on the agricultural reports instead of the man reviewing them. "We can adjust the terraforming mixture," he said after a moment. "The human colonists won't be adversely affected by the additional minerals your people need. In fact, it might improve crop yields across the board." This was typical of their collaboration. What might have been a source of conflict during the war had become an opportunity for mutual benefit. They had discovered that Althean and human needs often complemented each other rather than competing. "I'll approve the modified proposal," Zara said, making the necessary entries in the system. "What's next on the agenda?" "The Cultural Arts Festival." Marcus pulled up a new set of files. We have confirmation from 12 human worlds and 15 Althean colonies. The participation is better than we hoped, but we need to address some concerns about the performance venues. The Cultural Arts Festival have been one of their most ambitious projects. The idea was to showcase the artistic achievements of both species, demonstrating that they had more in common than their governments might believe. But organizing an event that would satisfy both human and Althean sensibilities had proven challenging. What kind of concerns? Zara asked, though she suspected she already knew. Some of the Althean performance art involves telepathic elements that humans can't fully appreciate, Marcus explained. And several human musical forms use frequency ranges that are uncomfortable for Althean hearing. Zara nodded thoughtfully. These were exactly the kinds of subtle differences that could undermine their efforts if not handled carefully. We could create separate venues for species-specific performances and mixed venues for art forms that translate well between our peoples. That's what I was thinking. We don't want to emphasize our differences, but we can't ignore them either. They spent the next hour working through the logistics, finding solutions to problems that would have seemed impossible during the war. Zara found herself impressed, as she often was, by Marcus's ability to find creative compromises. He approached each challenge with the same tactical thinking that had made him an effective military officer, but applied it to building bridges instead of destroying them. By midday, they had cleared most of their immediate tasks. Zara was preparing to break for lunch when Marcus hesitated at her office door. Zara, there's something else we need to discuss. Something more personal. She felt her pulse quicken, but kept her expression neutral. What is it? Marcus closed the door and returned to his seat. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. There are rumors circulating. About us. What kind of rumors? The kind that suggests our working relationship has become something more intimate. Some people are questioning whether we can remain objective in our duties. Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had been afraid this might happen. Despite their professionalism, there was no denying the connection between them. Others were apparently beginning to notice it as well. Who's talking? She asked. Both sides, unfortunately. Admiral Reese mentioned it during yesterday's briefing, and I've heard similar comments from some of the Althean officials. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had learned indicated stress or frustration. The problem is, they're not entirely wrong. Zara looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean that my feelings for you go beyond professional respect, and I think yours for me do as well. We've been pretending otherwise, but it's becoming harder to hide. She wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. He was right. Over the months they had worked together, her feelings for Marcus had grown beyond anything she had expected. She looked forward to their meetings, found excuses to extend their conversations, and caught herself thinking about him during her off hours. This complicates everything, she said finally. Yes, it does. But ignoring it won't make it go away. Marcus leaned forward, his green eyes intense. We have two choices. We can transfer one of us to a different assignment and pretend this never happened, or we can figure out how to handle it professionally while being honest about what's developing between us. The thought of losing their working partnership, of not seeing Marcus every day, sent a spike of anxiety through her chest. But she also understood the implications of pursuing a personal relationship while serving in such visible positions. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we be transparent. We inform our superiors about our personal connection and request guidance on how to proceed. If they decide it's incompatible with our duties, we accept that decision. But if there's a way to maintain our professional responsibilities while allowing our personal relationship to develop, we explore that possibility. Zara considered his proposal. It was risky, potentially career-ending for both of them, but the alternative was to continue living with an increasingly uncomfortable pretense, or to sacrifice something that had become important to both of them. There's another issue, she said. If we pursue this, we become symbols whether we want to or not. The first interspecies couple in positions of authority since the war ended. Every aspect of our relationship will be scrutinized, criticized, and politicized. I know. The question is whether what we have is worth that kind of pressure. Zara studied his face, seeing the same uncertainty and hope that she felt reflected in her own emotions. The smart thing would be to end this conversation and request a transfer. But intelligence and emotion were rarely aligned, especially when it came to matters of the heart. "Give me 24 hours to think about it," she said. Marcus nodded and stood to leave. "Whatever you decide, I'll respect your choice. But Zura, I want you to know that what I feel for you is real. It's not gratitude for saving my life, or curiosity about your species, or any other simple explanation. You've become important to me in ways I never expected." After he left, Zara sat alone in her office, staring out the window at the mixed human and Althean architecture of New Geneva's capital. The city was proof that their species could build something beautiful together, but it had taken decades and enormous effort to achieve that cooperation. That evening, she called her sister on Althea Prime. Kira Veltar was a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying the various species that made up the coalition. If anyone could provide objective advice about interspecies relationships, it would be her. Zara. Kira's image appeared on the holographic display, her four arms gesturing expressively as she spoke. "How wonderful to hear from you. How are things on New Geneva?" "Complicated," Zara admitted. "Kira, I need your professional opinion about something. Hypothetically, what would be the challenges facing an Althean human romantic relationship?" Her sister's expression grew thoughtful. "That's quite a hypothetical question. Are we talking about basic biological compatibility, psychological factors, or social implications?" "All of them." Kira settled back in her chair, clearly intrigued by the academic puzzle. "Well, biologically, there shouldn't be any major barriers. Our species are similar enough in basic physiology that romantic relationships are certainly possible. The psychological differences might be more significant. Humans tend to be more emotionally expressive, while we prefer indirect communication. There could be misunderstandings. And socially, that's where it gets complicated. Both our peoples have spent years viewing each other as enemies. An interspecies couple would face suspicion, criticism, and probably active hostility from some quarters. They would need to be very strong individuals to weather that kind of pressure. Zara absorbed this information. But it's not impossible. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Kira leaned forward, her violet eyes sharp with curiosity. "Zara, is this really hypothetical?" After a moment's hesitation, Zara told her sister everything. The battlefield rescue, the peace negotiations, the months of working together, and the growing connection she felt with Marcus Chun. Kira listened without interruption, her expression growing more interested with each detail. "This is fascinating," Kira said when Zara finished. "From an anthropological perspective, you're describing a perfect example of how shared trauma and mutual respect can overcome species barriers. The fact that your relationship began with an act of mercy rather than conquest changes the entire dynamic. You think it could work?" "I think it could work if both of you are committed to making it work. But, Zara, you need to understand what you're taking on. You wouldn't just be a couple, you'd be pioneers. Everything you do would be analyzed and judged by both species. Are you prepared for that?" The question haunted Zara through a sleepless night. She found herself walking the empty corridors of the initiative complex, thinking about choices and consequences. Through the large windows, she could see human and Althean security guards working together on their patrol routes, evidence of how much had already changed since the war ended. The next morning, she arrived at her office early and sent a message to Marcus requesting a private meeting. When he arrived, she could see the tension in his posture, the way he held himself ready for either acceptance or rejection. "I've made my decision," she said without preamble. "I want to try. I want to see what we could build together." Relief and joy flashed across his features before he schooled them back to professional composure. "Are you sure? Once we take this step, there's no going back to the way things were." "I'm sure, but we do this properly. We inform our superiors today, together. We're completely transparent about our relationship and how it might affect our work. And we accept whatever consequences come from that honesty. Marcus nodded. Agreed. Do you want to speak with the Althean Council first? Or should we request a joint meeting with both sides? Joint meeting. If we're going to be symbols of interspecies cooperation, we might as well start acting like it. The meeting was arranged for that afternoon in the initiative's main conference room. The Althean Council was represented by Ambassador Thyren Vortek, a senior diplomat who had been instrumental in negotiating the peace treaty. The human delegation included Admiral Sarah Reese, Marcus's former commanding officer, and Dr. Elena Vasquez, the initiative's civilian director. Zara had faced enemy fleets in battle, commanded thousands of troops in desperate situations, and negotiated with hostile alien governments. But, sitting across from these four individuals, preparing to announce her personal relationship with a former enemy officer, was one of the most difficult moments of her career. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "Colonel Chun and I have requested this meeting to discuss a matter that could affect our work with the initiative." Ambassador Thyren's expression remained neutral, but she could see the sharp intelligence in his eyes as he assessed the situation. "Please proceed, General. Over the past several months, Colonel Chun and I have developed a personal relationship that extends beyond our professional duties. We felt it was important to be transparent about this development before any questions arose about our objectivity or effectiveness." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Admiral Reese was the first to speak. "What exactly are you telling us, Colonel Chun?" Marcus sat straighter, meeting his former commander's gaze directly. "I'm telling you that I'm in love with General Veltar, ma'am, and I believe she feels the same way about me." The bluntness of his statement sent another shock of silence around the room. Dr. Vasquez cleared her throat. "This is unprecedented. How long has this been developing?" "The personal connection began during the war," Zara replied. "But our romantic feelings have developed over the months we've worked together here." Ambassador Thyren leaned forward, his four hands clasped in front of him. "General Veltar, are you prepared for the scrutiny this relationship will bring? Both our peoples have strong feelings about the former conflict. Many will see this as a betrayal of those who died in the war. I understand the challenges, Ambassador, but I also believe that our relationship could serve as proof that our species can move beyond the hatred of the past. Or it could be seen as evidence that the initiative has been compromised from the beginning," Admiral Reese said sharply. "How do we know that your judgment hasn't been affected by personal feelings? How do we know that classified information hasn't been shared inappropriately?" Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. "Admiral, with respect, you're questioning both our professionalism and our integrity. Our personal feelings developed because of our professional collaboration, not despite it. We've maintained appropriate boundaries throughout our work together." Dr. Vasquez had been studying her datapad during the exchange. Now she looked up with a thoughtful expression. "Actually, your collaboration has been remarkably successful. The projects you've worked on together have exceeded expectations in almost every case. Your cultural arts festival has generated more interspecies interest than any event since the peace treaty was signed, which could be interpreted as evidence that their personal relationship has enhanced their professional effectiveness," Ambassador Thyren said slowly. Admiral Reese looked skeptical. "Or it could mean they've been making decisions based on personal considerations rather than strategic ones." The debate continued for nearly an hour. Zara and Marcus answered questions about their work, their relationship, and their plans for the future. The scrutiny was intense, but neither of them backed down from their decision. Finally, Dr. Vasquez called for a recess so the Oversight Committee could deliberate privately. Zara and Marcus waited in an adjacent conference room, neither speaking, but both drawing comfort from the other's presence. When they were called back, Ambassador Thyren served as the committee's spokesperson. "General Veltar, Colonel Chun, we have reached a decision. Your personal relationship does present certain challenges, but we believe those challenges can be managed if you're willing to accept additional oversight and transparency requirements." Zara felt hope flutter in her chest. "What kind of requirements?" First, you will submit weekly reports detailing your professional interactions and any decisions that might be influenced by your personal relationship. Second, all classified information sharing will be documented and reviewed by your respective security officers. Third, you will participate in quarterly evaluation sessions to assess the impact of your relationship on your work performance. And fourth, Admiral Reese added, you understand that if your relationship becomes a significant obstacle to the initiative's mission, one or both of you may be reassigned. Marcus looked at Zara, and she could see her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. The conditions were restrictive, but they represented an opportunity rather than a prohibition. We accept, she said. The weeks that followed were some of the most challenging of Zara's life. News of their relationship spread quickly through both human and Althean space, generating reactions that range from curiosity to outright hostility. She received messages from family members questioning her loyalty, from fellow officers expressing disappointment, and from strangers offering both support and condemnation. The media attention was particularly difficult to handle. Reporters from both species requested interviews, analyzed their every public appearance, and speculated endlessly about the implications of their relationship. Zara found herself longing for the relative simplicity of wartime, when the enemy was clearly defined and the objectives were straightforward. But there were positive developments as well. The Cultural Arts Festival became a massive success, with attendance exceeding all projections. Young people from both species seemed particularly interested in the idea of interspecies relationships, while older generations remained more skeptical. More importantly, Zara found that her connection with Marcus continued to deepen even under the intense scrutiny. Their relationship had been forged in extraordinary circumstances and tested by enormous pressure. Rather than weakening their bond, the challenges seemed to strengthen their commitment to each other. One evening, 6 months after their first official acknowledgement of their relationship, they were walking together through New Geneva's botanical gardens. The facility showcased plant life from dozens of worlds, creating a living symbol of the diversity that could exist within unity. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked as they paused beside a display of Althean crystal flowers. All the complications, the pressure, the criticism. Zara considered the question seriously before answering. I regret the pain it's caused others. I regret that some people see our love as a betrayal of their losses during the war. But I don't regret choosing you, Marcus. Even knowing everything we've faced, I would make the same decision. He took her hand, a gesture that would have been impossible during the war, and remained controversial even now. I love you, Zara. Not just for saving my life, but for everything you are. Your strength, your compassion, your commitment to building something better than what came before. I love you too, she replied, the words carrying weight that transcended species barriers. And I believe what we're building together is worth every challenge we've faced. As they stood together in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of a dozen worlds, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From enemies on a battlefield to partners in peace, they had traveled an impossible distance. And yet, she sensed that their story was still just beginning. The real test of their relationship and their species' ability to move beyond the past was yet to come. But for now, in the quiet beauty of the botanical garden, surrounded by life from across the galaxy, it was enough to simply be together and dream of the future they would build with their own hands. 2 years had passed since Zara and Marcus had publicly acknowledged their relationship, and the galaxy had slowly begun to accept what had once seemed impossible. The Cultural Exchange Initiative had evolved from an experimental program into a permanent institution, with branches on 12 different worlds. Interspecies cooperation was no longer a dream, but a growing reality. Zara stood on the observation deck of the research station orbiting Kepler, 442b, the same world where she had first encountered Marcus during the war. The irony wasn't lost on her that they had returned here together, not as enemies, but as partners working to establish the galaxy's first fully integrated colony. The red sands below, once stained with the blood of both species, would soon bloom with crops that could feed humans and Altheans alike. The geological surveys are complete, Marcus said, joining her at the viewing port. He now wore the insignia of a brigadier general, having received rapid promotions as the human military recognized the value of officers experienced in interspecies relations. The mineral deposits are even richer than our preliminary scans suggested. This colony could become one of the most prosperous in the sector. Zara nodded, reviewing the data on her tablet. The Althean agricultural teams are equally optimistic. The soil composition will support our traditional crops with minimal terraforming. But there's something else we need to discuss. She activated her secure communicator, bringing up a message that had arrived that morning from the Althean High Council. Marcus read it over her shoulder, his expression growing serious as he processed the contents. "They want to name you Supreme Commander of all Coalition forces," he said slowly. "That's the highest military position in Althean space." "It's more than that," Zara replied. "The Supreme Commander position carries significant political authority as well. In times of crisis, the role is almost equivalent to that of an emperor. They're essentially offering me control over the entire Coalition military apparatus." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the planet below. "This is because of the growing tensions with the hegemony, isn't it?" The hegemony was a collection of aggressive species from the outer rim that had been expanding toward both human and Coalition space. Recent intelligence reports suggested they were building a massive fleet and considering military action against both the former enemies. The threat had driven humans and Altheans into even closer cooperation, but it had also raised difficult questions about military leadership and strategic planning. The High Council believes that someone with experience fighting alongside humans would be the ideal choice to coordinate a joint defense, Zara explained. They want a Supreme Commander who understands both species and can integrate our military capabilities effectively. And they want someone whose loyalty to the Alliance is beyond question, Marcus added. "Your relationship with me has become a symbol of interspecies cooperation. They're betting that the humans will trust a Coalition commander who's personally committed to maintaining the Alliance." Zara turned away from the viewing port to face him directly. "Marcus, if I accept this position, it changes everything. I would be responsible for the military defense of dozens of worlds. The decisions I make could affect billions of lives. You're already affecting billions of lives through your work here. The only difference is the scale and the formal recognition." He reached out to touch her arm. "Zara, you're one of the most brilliant military minds I've ever encountered. If anyone can successfully integrate human and Coalition forces, it's you. But what about us? What about our life together?" The question had been haunting her since she received the message. "As Supreme Commander, I would have obligations that could take me away from New Geneva for months at a time. Our relationship would become even more scrutinized, more politicized." Marcus was quiet for several minutes, and she could see him working through the implications. Finally, he spoke with the measured tone she recognized from their most serious discussions. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've been holding back because I wasn't sure how you would react." Zara felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. "What is it?" "Yesterday, I received a communication from Admiral Reese. The human military command has been observing the same intelligence reports about the hegemony threat. They want to create a new position, Marshal of Joint Forces. Someone who would coordinate human military assets with Coalition forces under a unified command structure." The implications hit her immediately. "They offered it to you?" "Yes. The position would be equivalent in authority to your Supreme Commander role, but focused on human forces and interspecies coordination. If we both accepted, we would essentially be partners in defending both our civilizations." Zara stared at him, processing this new information. The idea of serving alongside Marcus in such a capacity was both thrilling and terrifying. They would be making decisions that could determine the fate of entire star systems, with their personal relationship at the center of the most important military alliance in galactic history. "Have you made your decision?" she asked. "That depends on yours. I won't take the position unless you accept the Supreme Commander role. We're stronger together, Zara. We always have been." She walked back to the viewing port, looking down at the world where their paths had first crossed. 6 years ago, she had made a split-second decision to save the life of an enemy soldier. That choice had led to everything that followed: their romance, their partnership in peace, and now this opportunity to defend both their peoples together. "There's one more consideration," she said. "If we accept these positions, we become more than military leaders. We become the living symbol of human-Althean cooperation. Every decision we make will be analyzed, not just for its strategic value, but for what it says about the possibility of our species working together." "I know. The pressure will be enormous." Marcus joined her at the viewing port again. "But consider the alternative. If we refuse, both our governments will have to find other leaders for these critical positions. Leaders who don't have our experience, our understanding of both species, or our personal commitment to the alliance." Zara thought about the young soldiers on both sides who would serve under their command. Human and Althean troops who would need to trust each other with their lives, just as she and Marcus had learned to trust each other. The success or failure of that cooperation could determine whether their civilizations survive the coming threat. "If we do this, we do it together," she said finally. "Joint command structure, shared decision-making, complete transparency between our forces. No secretos, no hidden agendas, no divided loyalties." Agreed. "We'll need to establish protocols that ensure both species' military cultures are respected while creating effective unified tactics." Zara made her decision with the same certainty she had felt on that battlefield years ago. "Send word to both our governments. We accept, with the conditions we've discussed." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, briefings, and ceremonies. The announcement of their joint appointment sent shock waves through both human and coalition space. Some celebrated it as the ultimate expression of interspecies cooperation, while others questioned whether personal relationships should play such a prominent role in military leadership. The opposition was particularly vocal among veterans of the war. Zara received messages from former comrades who accused her of betraying the memory of those who had died fighting humans. Marcus faced similar criticism from human veterans who questioned his loyalty to his own species. But there was also unprecedented support. Young officers from both militaries volunteered for joint service assignments. The recruitment rates for integrated units increased dramatically. Most importantly, preliminary intelligence suggested that the hegemony was reconsidering their aggressive plans in light of the obvious unity between humans and Altheans. The formal investiture ceremony took place on New Geneva, with representatives from both governments in attendance. Zara stood in the center of the Great Hall, wearing the ceremonial armor that marked her as Supreme Commander of Coalition forces. Beside her, Marcus wore the dress uniform of a Marshal of Joint Forces, the newly created rank that placed him at the pinnacle of human military hierarchy. Ambassador Thyron stepped forward to deliver the oath that would formalize her position. "General Zara Veltar, do you swear to defend the Coalition and its allies against all enemies, to lead with wisdom and courage, and to uphold the principles of justice and mercy that define our civilization?" "I so swear," Zara replied, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. Admiral Reese administered Marcus's oath with similar formality. When both ceremonies were complete, they turned to face each other for the final ritual, the pledge of unity that would bind their commands together. "Supreme Commander Veltar," Marcus said, using the formal protocol they had practiced, "I pledge that human forces under my command will stand with coalition forces under yours, as one military, one purpose, one destiny." "Marshal Chun," Zara replied, "I pledge that coalition forces under my command will stand with human forces under yours, as one military, one purpose, one destiny." They clasped hands in the center of the stage, a gesture that was broadcast across hundreds of worlds. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. The former enemies who had become lovers were now the ultimate guardians of both their civilizations. The celebration that followed was subdued, reflecting the serious nature of the threat they now faced. Intelligence reports continued to suggest that the hegemony was building towards some kind of major military action. Both human and coalition space were ramping up defensive preparations, and there was growing concern that open warfare was inevitable. Late that evening, Zara and Marcus found themselves alone in their shared quarters, reviewing the latest strategic assessments. The weight of their new responsibilities was already apparent in the volume of information they needed to process and the decisions they would need to make in the coming days. The Third Fleet reports they can be ready for deployment within 6 weeks, Marcus said, studying the deployment schedules on his holo display. But Admiral Torres is concerned about the integration protocols with Althean ships. The communication systems aren't fully compatible yet. The technical teams are working on that, Zara replied. Commander Vextai thinks she can have universal translators installed on all major vessels within a month. The bigger challenge will be tactical integration. Human and Althean fighting styles are very different. They've been working on this problem for weeks. Human military doctrine emphasized mobility and aggressive tactics, while Althean forces preferred defensive positions and coordinated group maneuvers. Finding ways to combine these approaches into effective joint operations would require extensive training and careful planning. I've been thinking about the battle simulations we ran last week, Marcus said. What if we structured our fleets with mixed crews rather than trying to coordinate separate human and Althean ships? Put human and Althean officers together on the same bridges, the same command structures. Zara looked up from her reports. That's a radical approach. Both militaries have strong traditions about chain of command and cultural protocols. Integration at that level would require fundamental changes to how both our forces operate. But it would also eliminate most of the communication and coordination problems we've been struggling with. Instead of two separate militaries trying to work together, we would have one truly integrated force. The idea was intriguing, but Zara could already see the obstacles. The resistance from both sides would be enormous. Career officers who have spent decades in single-species commands would have to adapt to entirely new structures. The cultural barriers alone would take months to overcome. Unless we lead by example, Marcus said. What if we established a flagship with a truly integrated crew? Human and Althean officers serving together in every department. If we can prove it works, the rest of the fleet might follow. Zara considered the proposal. It was ambitious, potentially revolutionary, and extremely risky. If it failed, it could undermine confidence in their leadership and damage the alliance they were trying to protect. But if it succeeded, it could create a military force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It would have to be perfect, she said. No mistakes, no conflicts, no evidence that integration compromises effectiveness. The crew would need to be volunteers, officers who are already committed to interspecies cooperation. I know just the ship, Marcus said with a slight smile. The UES Harmony, the newest cruiser in the human fleet. It was designed with modular command structures that could easily accommodate Althean officers. And Captain Sarah Kim has been pushing for integration opportunities since she graduated from the academy. And I know the perfect Althean contingent, Zara replied, her excitement growing. Commander Thane Velmore's tactical unit. They've been training with human simulation programs for the past year, and they're eager for real cooperation opportunities. They spent the rest of the evening planning the details of their integrated flagship experiment. By morning, they had outlined a proposal that would either revolutionize military cooperation or destroy their careers in spectacular failure. The proposal received mixed reactions from their respective commands. Conservative officers on both sides argued that it was too risky, too experimental for such a critical time. But younger officers, particularly those who had grown up after the war ended, were enthusiastic about the possibilities. After 2 weeks of debate, both governments approved the experiment on a limited basis. The UES Harmony would be refitted with Althean technology and crewed by volunteers for both species. The ship would serve as their mobile command center, demonstrating the possibility of true military integration while coordinating the broader defense against the hegemony threat. The integration process took 6 weeks and required careful attention to everything from dietary requirements in the galley to atmospheric preferences in different sections of the ship. But gradually, the diverse crew began to function as a unified team. Zara stood on the bridge of the Harmony for the first time, looking around at the mixed human and Althean officers working side by side. At the tactical station, a human lieutenant was collaborating with an Althean engineer to optimize the ship's new hybrid weapon systems. At communications, an Althean officer was coordinating with human fleet elements using translation protocols that had been developed specifically for the integrated crew. All stations report ready, Supreme Commander, Captain Kim announced. Like everyone else on the ship, she used formal titles that acknowledged the mixed chain of command. Thank you, Captain. Marshal Chun, are human fleet elements prepared for joint exercises? Marcus, standing at his own command position on the bridge, consulted his displays before responding. All human vessels report ready for coordination with coalition forces, Supreme Commander. It was the moment of truth. The joint exercises they were about to conduct would be the first real test of their integrated command structure. If it worked, it would prove that true military cooperation between their species was possible. If it failed, it would provide ammunition for those who argued that the integration experiment was a dangerous mistake. All ships, Zara announced over the fleet communication system, commence exercise unity. Show them what we can accomplish together. The exercises lasted for 3 days and exceeded even their most optimistic projections. Human ships provided rapid response capabilities that allowed Althean forces to maintain their defensive formations while striking at enemy targets. Althean tactical analysis improved human targeting accuracy by nearly 40%. Most importantly, the crew of the Harmony demonstrated that humans and Altheans could work together seamlessly when properly motivated and trained. The success of Exercise Unity sent a clear message throughout the galaxy. The alliance between humans and Altheans was not just a political convenience, but a genuine partnership that made both species stronger. The psychological impact on the hegemony was immediate and significant. Intelligence reports indicated that hegemony forces were postponing their planned offensive and reconsidering their strategic objectives. The sight of human and Althean ships operating as a unified fleet had apparently convinced them that their initial assessments of the alliance's strength had been insufficient. But Zara knew that the real test was still to come. The exercises had been conducted under controlled conditions, with carefully selected crews and predetermined scenarios. When the hegemony finally made their move, the integrated fleet would face the chaos and uncertainty of actual combat. Standing on the bridge of the Harmony as they returned to New Geneva, she felt the weight of command in a way she never had before. Thousands of lives depended on the decisions she and Marcus would make in the coming weeks. The future of two civilizations rested on the effectiveness of the alliance they had helped to create. But as she looked around at the mixed crew working together with the efficiency born of mutual respect and shared purpose, she felt a growing confidence in what they had built together. The war that had once divided their species had ended, but the peace they were fighting to preserve was something far greater than the mere absence of conflict. It was the foundation of a new kind of civilization, one where former enemies could become not just allies, but family. He attack came without warning at 0347 hours ship time as the integrated fleet patrolled the outer reaches of the Proxima system. Zara was reviewing intelligence reports in her ready room when the Harmony's alert klaxons began wailing, their harsh sound echoing through the corridors like a cry of pain. She reached the bridge in less than 30 seconds, her military training overriding the disorientation of being awakened from deep sleep. Marcus was already at his command station, coordinating with the human elements of the fleet, while Captain Kim managed the Harmony's immediate response. "Report," Zara ordered, sliding into her command chair and bringing up her tactical displays. Lieutenant Commander Thane, the Althean officer, serving as tactical coordinator, looked up from his sensor readings with an expression of controlled alarm. "Supreme Commander, we have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Initial count suggests at least 40 vessels of unknown configuration." "Hegemony?" Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Confirmed," Thane replied. "Energy signatures match intelligence profiles for hegemony assault ships. They're moving toward the inner system at maximum sublight speed." Zara studied the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating vectors, timing, and strategic options. The hegemony had chosen their moment well. The integrated fleet was conducting routine patrols, spread across multiple sectors to provide early warning coverage. They would need time to consolidate their forces, time the enemy might not give them. "Fleet status," she ordered. Captain Kim responded immediately. "We have 18 ships in the immediate area, including the Harmony. The second squadron is 6 hours away, and the Coalition Defense Fleet is 8 hours out from Althea Prime. 18 ships against 40. The mathematics were not encouraging, but Zara had fought against worse odds during the war. More importantly, she had something the hegemony didn't expect, a truly integrated command structure that could respond faster and more flexibly than traditional military formations. "Marshal Chun, coordinate human rapid response protocols. I want every available ship moving toward this system within the hour." She turned to her communications officer. "Send a priority alert to Coalition Command. Request immediate deployment of all available forces to Proxima System." The bridge became a hub of controlled activity as orders were transmitted and acknowledged. Zara watched the tactical display update as friendly forces began moving to intercept the hegemony invasion fleet. But even with optimal response times, they would be significantly outnumbered for the first several hours of the engagement. "Supreme Commander," Lieutenant Vex, the Althean communications specialist, looked up from her console with concern. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead hegemony vessel. They're demanding to speak with you directly." Zara exchanged glances with Marcus. It was unusual for the hegemony to communicate before attacking. Their typical strategy was to overwhelm enemy forces with surprise assaults, using their superior numbers to achieve quick victories. "Put it through," she ordered. The main display flickered, then resolved into the image of a being unlike any in Zara's experience. The creature was roughly humanoid, but covered in chitinous armor that seemed to be part of its natural biology. Its face was dominated by multiple eyes arranged in a complex pattern, and when it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple vocal chambers. "I am War Leader Thakmor of the Hegemony 4th Assault Fleet," the being announced. "You are the one called Supreme Commander Veltar." "I am," Zara replied, keeping her voice steady despite the alien appearance of her opponent. "What do you want?" "Your surrender," Thakmor said simply. "We have studied your alliance, your attempts to unite the humans and coalition species. It is an abomination that threatens the natural order of the galaxy." "The natural order according to whom?" Marcus asked, stepping forward so he was visible on the transmission. Thakmor's multiple eyes focused on him with obvious displeasure. "The human who corrupts coalition loyalty." "Marshal Chun, we have researched your history. Your relationship with the Althean female is a weakness we intend to exploit." Zara felt anger flare in her chest, but forced herself to remain calm. "You come a long way to deliver threats, War Leader. What are your actual intentions?" "Simple. Surrender now, and we will allow the human and coalition populations to be relocated to separate sectors under hegemony oversight. Continue to resist, and we will destroy your ships and occupy your worlds by force. The choice is yours." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Zara studied the tactical display, watching as the hegemony fleet continued its steady advance toward the inner system. They were being methodical, confident in their numerical superiority. "They're trying to divide us," Marcus observed. "Make us doubt our alliance by focusing on our personal relationship." "Then, they don't understand what they're facing," Zara replied. She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "All hands, this is Supreme Commander Veltar. The hegemony has issued an ultimatum demanding our surrender. They believe our alliance is a weakness, that our cooperation is merely a political convenience that will collapse under pressure." She paused, looking around the mixed human and Althean officers who served together on the bridge. They're about to learn how wrong they are. We're not just allies of convenience. We're not separate species fighting parallel wars. We're one fleet, one family, and we protect each other. The response was immediate and visceral. Humans and Altheans throughout the ship voiced their agreement, their determination evident in every word. The crew of the Harmony had been working together for months, and the bonds they had formed transcended species barriers. "Battle stations," Zara ordered. "All ships, prepare for engagement. Execute Formation Delta 7 and show them what integration really means." Formation Delta 7 was one of the tactical innovations they had developed during their training exercises. It paired human ships with Althean vessels in complementary roles, with the fast-moving human destroyers providing reconnaissance and harassment while the heavily armed Althean cruisers delivered devastating coordinated strikes. The first phase of the battle began at maximum weapons range, with both sides probing for weaknesses and testing defensive capabilities. The hegemony ships proved to be well-armed and heavily shielded, but their tactics were predictable, following standard assault doctrine that emphasized overwhelming firepower over tactical flexibility. "Their formation is too rigid," observed Commander Thane as he analyzed the enemy attack patterns. "They're not adapting to our maneuvers." "Confirmed," Marcus agreed. "They're fighting us like we're two separate fleets instead of one integrated force. We can use that against them." Zara was already forming a plan. "All ships, execute Maneuver Gamma 4. Human vessels, break formation, and conduct harassment attacks on their left flank. Coalition ships, maintain defensive positions, and prepare for coordinated strikes." The integrated fleet split apart with practiced precision, the human ships accelerating toward the hegemony left wing while the Althean vessels held position. To an outside observer, it might have looked like the alliance was fragmenting under pressure, exactly what the enemy expected to see. The hegemony took the bait, redirecting their assault ships to pursue the human vessels while concentrating their heavy cruisers against the apparently isolated Althean formation. It was exactly the mistake Zara had been hoping for. Now, she ordered, the human ships suddenly reverse course, drawing the pursuing hegemony vessels directly into the firing range of the waiting Althean cruisers. Simultaneously, the coalition ships opened fire with perfectly synchronized volleys that had been calculated to overwhelm enemy shields through coordinated timing rather than individual firepower. The results were devastating. 6 hegemony vessels were destroyed in the first coordinated strike, and several more were badly damaged. The enemy formation wavered as commanders tried to adapt to tactics they had never encountered before. "They're regrouping," Captain Kim reported, "pulling back to reassess our capabilities." But Zara wasn't about to give them time to adapt. "All ships advance. Maintain formation integrity and prepare for continuous assault. Don't let them recover." The battle raged for 3 hours, with the integrated fleet using their superior coordination to offset the hegemony's numerical advantage. Human and Althean ships worked together with seamless precision, each species' strengths compensating for the other's limitations. But numbers eventually began to tell. Despite their tactical advantages, the Allied fleet was taking casualties. The destroyer UES Vigilant was lost with all hands when it moved to protect a damaged Althean cruiser. The coalition ship ARS Vengeance suffered catastrophic damage to its drive systems and had to withdraw from the battle line. Supreme Commander, Lieutenant Vex announced. Long-range sensors are detecting additional contacts. Multiple fleets approaching from different vectors. Zara felt her heart sink. If the hegemony had brought reinforcements, the battle was effectively over. Even with perfect tactics, they couldn't overcome odds of 3 or 4 to 1. But as the new contacts resolved on the tactical display, she realized her error. The approaching fleets weren't hegemony reinforcements. Coalition's second fleet, arriving on schedule, came a familiar voice over the communications channel. Admiral Fotak commanding, ready to join the dance. Human 7th Fleet, reporting for duty, came another transmission. Admiral Martinez here. Sorry we're late to the party. Additional fleets continued to arrive over the next hour, both human and coalition forces responding to the emergency alerts that had been sent when the battle began. The strategic situation reversed rapidly as the Allied forces achieved numerical parity, then superiority. War leader Thakmor made one final attempt at negotiation as his fleet found itself surrounded and outgunned. Supreme Commander Veltar, we underestimated your alliance. Perhaps terms can be negotiated. You had your chance for negotiation, Zara replied coldly. You chose war instead. Surrender now, or face the consequences of your decision. The hegemony chose to fight to the end. Their remaining ships launched a desperate assault against the Allied formation, but the integrated fleet's superior coordination made the outcome inevitable. Within 2 hours, the last hegemony vessel had either surrendered or been destroyed. In the aftermath of the battle, Zara found herself standing in the Harmony's medical bay, visiting the wounded from both species who had served together and bled together in defense of their shared values. The sight of human and Althean medical personnel working side by side to save lives without regard to species confirmed what she had always believed. Their alliance was based on something far stronger than political convenience. Marcus found her there as she was speaking with Lieutenant Caver, an Althean pilot who had lost his left arm, saving a human transport ship from a hegemony assault fighter. How are you feeling? She asked the young officer. Caver managed a weak smile. Better than the hegemony pilots who attacked us, Supreme Commander. The medical team says I'll be back on flight status within a month. That's the spirit, Marcus said, joining the conversation. Your actions saved 47 human civilians. That's not going to be forgotten. After they left the medical bay, Zara and Marcus walked together through the corridors of their ship, observing the mixed crew as they conducted post-battle repairs and preparations. The integration that had seemed so experimental just months ago now felt completely natural. The intelligence reports are coming in, Marcus said. This wasn't just a random assault. The hegemony has been planning a coordinated offensive against both human and coalition space for over a year. This attack was meant to test our response capabilities and probe for weaknesses in our alliance. And instead, we showed them our greatest strength, Zara replied. The battle reports will be analyzed by every military in the galaxy. They'll see that true integration makes us more powerful than the sum of our parts. They reached the observation deck where they had spent so many quiet moments planning for the future. Now, looking out at the debris field that marked their first major victory together, the future looked very different from what either of them had imagined. There will be more battles, Marcus said. The hegemony won't give up easily, and there are other threats emerging from the outer rim. Our alliance is going to be tested again and again. Then, we'll face those tests together, Zara replied, just as we always have. But even as she spoke the words, she could sense that something fundamental had changed. The battle had proven that their integrated fleet could work, but it had also demonstrated the enormous responsibilities that came with their success. They were no longer just military commanders, but the architects of a new kind of civilization. The next few weeks brought a flood of requests from both human and coalition worlds. Governments wanted to establish their own integrated military units. Scientists requested permission to collaborate on research projects that could benefit both species. Trade organizations proposed economic partnerships that would have been unthinkable just years before. Most significantly, there were requests for Zara and Marcus to visit various worlds to demonstrate the possibilities of interspecies cooperation. They found themselves traveling constantly, speaking to mixed audiences about the importance of unity in the face of external threats. It was during one such visit to the human colony world of New Horizon that the conversation took an unexpected turn. They were addressing a joint session of the colonial government when Governor Patricia Santos asked a question that caught them both by surprise. Supreme Commander Veltar, Marshal Chun, your partnership has clearly been successful from a military standpoint, but I'm curious about the long-term implications. Do you see yourselves as representatives of your respective species, or as something new entirely? Zara had been asked variations of this question before, but something about the way the governor phrased it made her pause. They had begun their relationship as individuals from different species who found common ground. But over the years, they had evolved into something that transcended those original boundaries. I think, she said slowly, that we've become proof that the divisions between species are less important than the values we choose to uphold. Marshal Chun, and I represent the possibility that former enemies can become family, that different peoples can build something together that's stronger than what they could achieve separately. But more than that, Marcus added, we represent hope. Hope that the future doesn't have to be defined by the conflicts of the past. Hope that cooperation is possible even between the most unlikely partners. After the presentation, Governor Santos approached them privately. There's something I wanted to discuss with you both. Something that could have significant implications for the future of human coalition relations. She led them to a secure conference room where several other officials were waiting. Zara recognized some of them from their government files. Senator Maria Reeves from the Human Colonial Congress, Ambassador Chun Wei from the Earth delegation, and several others whose presence suggested this was no casual meeting. What?